built on relationships, focused on people, and rooted in the community. Welcome to the Build Blue podcast. Tune in for weekly episodes featuring guests who are building a better tomorrow. You'll hear inspiring stories from industry leaders, business owners, community partners, and our team members. The Build Blue podcast, where construction comes to life. An Apex Construction Group production. This is the Build Blue podcast. My name is Jess Blaze with Apex Construction Group, and we are joined today by Julia Ketcham Corbett from Blethen Behrens. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. We'll start by letting you tell yourself a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Blethen Behrens.
All right. So I'm Julia Corbett. I'm an attorney at Blethen Behrens, which is a law firm here in Mankato. I'm one of the managing partners. There are 3 managing partners. So in addition to my law practice, I also help manage the business.
Okay. Before we get into the main questions, we always ask an Apex Icebreaker is what we call them. So if you could open and operate any business, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I'd have to think about ways to use my organization and other skills, I think. But, it would probably be something hospitality related. I'm wondering, could I do a bed and dinner instead of bed and breakfast? I like my sleep. So getting up in the morning to make breakfast for everybody would not be my jam, but I love people. I love to cook. I love to entertain. And so maybe if I could do like a bed and brunch or
I love
dinner.
That's it's
they're on their own for breakfast.
No, you're not supposed to get up early on vacation anyway.
That's right.
Okay, bed and dinner. I love it.
Bed and dinner. Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to come up with some sort of alliteration to make that work better, but
I've seen you described in other interviews as an employment law master. So can you go more in depth on how you chose that type of law and what it means to specialize in employment law?
Yeah. So I started at Blethen Behrens a long time ago, 1994. I'm going to date myself. At that time, employment law, while it was a practice area, wasn't as involved as it is now, and it wasn't as significant a focus area, maybe is the best way to say it. And there weren't firms in Mankato that were doing a lot of it. And so we're one of the larger firms. We have a lot of business clients. They were starting to come with more and more employment law questions. The Americans with Disabilities Act had been passed around that time. We didn't have the FMLA yet. We were just sort of starting on the cusp of more and more laws and regulations around the employment relationship. And our clients had needs, and there really wasn't a place to get those fulfilled. So we started developing that area of expertise in the early 90s, and I happened to sort of be there at the right time. When I started practicing, when you start as an attorney in at least our size firm, you kind of start doing everything. And we were doing employment law seminars for our business clients, and I got the opportunity to prepare materials and then ultimately to present, and found it was an area that I really enjoyed and kind of got and understood, and it just developed from there. So I don't know if it sort of picked me, but I happened to be in the right place at the right time, sort of on the cusp of it emerging as a significant practice area, and it's grown kind of by leaps and bounds since then.
Absolutely. So. It's crazy when you say the mid-90s to think about how fast and how recently that is all developed.
Yeah, and it's constantly changing. I mean, we're seeing legislation around paid sick and PTO time. There continues to just be an evolution of the law around the employment relationship, which keeps it exciting and interesting and challenging all in one.
Is it hard to keep up with all those changes?
Yeah, I practice in some other areas as well, and I would say that the employment area is the one that takes sort of the constant learning, reading, keeping on top of things, because it is really growing and moving and changing yet.
Has the work from home, flexible scheduling, and those kind of changes over the last couple of years affected employment law?
Yes. For us personally as a firm, we saw impact, when the stay-at-home orders happened. We were somewhat prepared for that, but our administrative staff really was not prepared. The attorneys could go home. That we were already set up to work remotely and all of those things, but our administrative staff, it was a struggle, and they found they didn't really like it. It was interesting. They really wanted to come back, and in subsequent shutdown orders, were really creative with us about ways they could stay in the office and socially distance and do things to try to stay in the office rather than go home. But for a lot of my clients, the remote work and the challenges that creates and the opportunities. I mean, I think what we've learned is you can do it in a lot of jobs. And, that creates challenges from a recruitment and a retention standpoint. It also creates opportunities. It creates challenges and opportunities in terms of how you manage that workforce when they're at home, creating policies around that, expectations, performance management, all of those things are changing.
Yeah, and probably or maybe would have changed regardless, but the events of the last 2 years really sped that up, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it went, from 0 to 100, just all of a sudden it was here and everybody had to deal with it and deal with it quickly. And I would say, for many years before that, often from an accommodation standpoint, people would request the ability to work from home. And there was a lot of pushback from the employer. We can't make that work. There's no way to make that work. And I think what we've discovered is for many roles, there is a way to make that work. Yeah. It creates challenges, but there are ways to make it work.
Absolutely. What would you say is the best part of your job?
Oh, gosh. Well, I would say it's the people, the people that I get to work with. So I see being a lawyer as a helping profession. We're there. When my kids were little, they would try to understand what I did. And I would say, like when you have an argument with somebody, I'm the one who comes in and helps you try to figure out how to get through that. And the people I get to work with, both, in representing them individually, but then within my employment practice, my relationships with the HR professionals that I work with day in and day out, I love it. I love that. I'm a relational person. I like to do business with people I know. And so those relationships are just huge. So I think that just kind of day in, day out. And then just the challenges of the day to day, like the things employees do. And I find out on a Monday morning, that happened over the weekend. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I've never thought of that. Or I would have never thought of doing that. And now how are we going to, how am I going to help my client deal with whatever it is they're dealing with? It's different every single day. And I do love that. It's challenging.
A constant problem solver.
Yes,
definitely. In many different ways.
Definitely.
Company culture is something that we're hearing a lot about right now. What are some things from your perspective that make companies with good culture stand out?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it's being authentic with their employees is a big key. I think you have to walk the talk. Employees figure it out really quickly if you're saying all the right things, but the reality is your culture is different. And it's easy to talk about culture. It's harder to put it into practice. I think, that sort of teamwork and involvement of employees and trying to give them a voice and trying to listen. It isn't always possible to have employees sort of running the show. Otherwise, you've got too many people and there's just some things that won't work, all of those things. But I think where employees feel invested and they feel valued and they know that that's authentic from leadership down, that's huge for culture. And we're in a position now where employees have more power than they did before. And so you've got to meet them where they are from a culture standpoint or you'll lose them. And there aren't people out there, I don't know where they all went, but everybody's searching for employees, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't have a good culture, you're going to lose those good quality people.
Yeah.
So I think it's authenticity.
That's a great word and great points. And kind of to that point, what factors may indicate that culture is an area that a company may need to look at or improve?
Well, I think high turnover is probably one of the first indicators. If you have really high turnover, especially, in a larger organization within a department, that's usually a sign that there's something going on in terms of that leadership and culture in that department. Not always, but I think that's a big sign. I think if you're actually listening to your employees and taking opportunities to gather that feedback and trying to be honest and accepting that feedback, that can be a challenge as a manager and an owner. Is you think everything is rosy, and when you hear it's not, sometimes that's hard to deal with. But I think if you can really listen to that, you'll find those clues that culture is not great. But exit interviews are a way to look at that and to analyze that culture. Departing employees often will be more honest with you than your current employees. And sometimes I talk to my clients about letting that employee be gone for a little bit before you do that exit interview. Because if they're gone and they're happy, and again, they may be more likely to be more honest with you about the culture issues.
Yeah. Certainly. That's a great piece of advice. I know you guys are doing some cool things out in the community in regards to employment law that we're participating in and other businesses. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So we have always been sort of about teaching. Like I said, when I started, it was all about getting education into the hands of our clients and helping them navigate the employment situation. We do a lot of that across legal areas. My partner, Silas Danielson, does a landlord-tenant seminar. He does a lot of landlord work. So he does a landlord-tenant seminar where he's teaching, his landlord clients whatever the update. I don't know anything about landlord-tenant law, but I'm sure there's something that he's teaching them. He's gonna kill me. But from the employment law standpoint, we've partnered with ABDO, which formerly Abdo Eichen Myers, now ABDO, and we have a program called ABDO Engage that we've been running for this is our third year. It's a 9-month program for HR professionals, both experienced and entry level, to bring them together as a group to help each other with their HR needs and issues. And then, we present both from sort of the accounting and HR management side and the legal side on various issues over the 9 months. It's an hour and a half once a month, and it's been super well received. It's one of my favorite days of the month. I love going and doing Abdo Engage and spending that time with our HR partners.
It's a great idea and another great way to connect people.
Yes, absolutely. And they need each other, and it's a safe, confidential place to talk through their issues. And often with HR professionals, in smaller organizations, they tend to be people without HR backgrounds in many cases. They're converted accountants or bookkeepers. They're an office manager who's wearing 10 different hats. Sure. And so to give them expertise is huge, and to give them other people to bounce ideas off of is huge. And then even our expert people who've been in the industry for a long time learn a lot and find new ways of doing things and fresh ideas. And so, it's been a great program, and we've gotten great feedback from the participants. We have a participant this year who actually participated last year and just wanted to come back.
Oh, cool.
And we were like, well, the content isn't going to be a lot different. She's like, I don't care. I learned so much, and I just feel like I'm going to keep learning. And so it's been a great program.
That's awesome. Speaking of wearing a lot of hats, in addition to your role at Blethen, you're quite active in the community. And I'm just wondering if community service has always been a part of your life.
Yeah, so I grew up in a town of 1,300 people. I had 37 people in my graduating class, I think, 37. 13 girls, more guys than girls. When you're in a community that size, a school that size, you either do it all or it doesn't get done. So like my list of things I was involved in high school would probably fill 3 pages of your notebook. And it's partly out of necessity. It's also, I'm somebody who needs to be busy. I'm a sort of, I don't sit well. I don't do nothing well. So, but I also watched my parents involved in our community. And, there's that saying that, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I believe that we have a great community here, but it didn't get that way by accident. It doesn't just happen. It happens because people get involved and do things. I served on the Greater Mankato Growth Board for 9 years, I think, or 10 years. I chaired it for a couple of years. And I remember my friend Chad Supernot making a comment once, and this was specific about GMG, but I think it applies to community service too. And his analogy was basically a church analogy. You can go to church, you can get the message, you can sit there, and you'll get kind of everything you probably need just sitting there. But is that really your duty and your obligation? Isn't your duty and obligation to give back? You know, that when the collection plate goes by, you give. And when they need volunteers for something, you give. And you do more because you believe in the mission. And I believe in the mission of this community. I totally believe this community is awesome.
It is.
But it doesn't happen just by accident. It happens because of people and their willingness to get involved. And through GMG, we do these inner city leadership visits. And, you know, when we do them, we get asked kind of, what is the secret sauce here? And it's the people. It's the people and their willingness to get involved and to try to make a difference and to try to make our community better. So it's important to me because it's what I was shown. It's what I believe in. This has been a great place to raise our family and to own and run a business and all those things. But like I said, that didn't happen by accident. It was paved, the way it was paved, by a lot of people ahead of us. And I feel like we've got an obligation to continue that.
That's a great point. I actually had Andy Wilkie and Jessica Beyer on the podcast. They were on the very first episode,
Yes, I heard them.
And we talked a little bit about that, and just the culture in the community of giving back is so rich and so deep. And it's also, I think, the encouragement that young professionals have, and the things that GMG and the United Way do to cultivate that young talent and bring them into that next generation, I think is really cool.
Absolutely. When I started here in 1994, there was nothing like young professionals or those kinds of groups. And I was happy to see that develop over the course of being involved in GMG. I think it's huge. And that group is hungry, and they want to connect, and they want to give back, and they don't necessarily know how. And I think as older leaders, you know, we've got an obligation to mentor that, because otherwise, you know, the community doesn't continue to benefit. So it's awesome that we have all these young professionals who want to be involved and want to make our community better.
I agree.
Awesome.
It's really exciting. So you're also a mother and wife on top of all of these other things.
Yes.
And I think oftentimes when people look at the achievements and schedules of a high capacity person like yourself, you often wonder, like, how do you do it all? How do you balance it all? So I mean, I know that question we could talk about probably for hours, but just work-life balance, your family, and just kind of how that has all looked for you throughout your career.
Yeah, so I get asked to present on work-life balance. I don't love that term, but, you know, I think for me, first of all, it probably looks like I have all the plates in the air all the time, and half the time one of the plates is sort of flying off into, you know, some odd direction, and I'm trying to wrangle it back in. But I think, you know, work-life balance isn't about everything being in balance all the time. It's not. There are times when work has to take priority. There are times when family has to take priority. And I think it's a matter of figuring out for yourself how that works best. For me, I mean, first off, it starts for me with having a really good partner. If Brian wasn't as supportive as he is of my work, my community involvement, all those things, I don't think I could do it all. So that's probably number one. And not everybody has the luxury of that. The other piece, as I said before, is I don't sit very well. So I do better when I'm busy. I'm uber organized, which is probably a fault at sometimes. But when my kids were little, and I'm lucky to have a lot of flexibility in my job. You know, I can work at night, I can work on weekends, I can work late, I can work early. You know, my clients have needs between 8 and 5, but I have some flexibility. And so when my kids were little, you know, my kids were in every sport known to man. When the schedule would come out, I would just go in and book myself out. And I would not schedule things. And that didn't mean that I wasn't working, because I work a lot of hours and I work hard, but it might mean that I wasn't working on Friday afternoons from spring to about mid-July, because we had baseball tournaments every weekend. And I didn't know when we'd have to leave. And so I'd book myself out. And if I could be there, then I'd book myself back in. And so it's, I think, a lot for me about organization. I'm super type A. I have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets. I sort of get made fun of for my spreadsheets. So
I'm laughing because my sister is the same way, and I know you know my sister very well, and I always tease her about her spreadsheets.
Yes, yeah. It's a sign of high intelligence, I'm sure. I'm sure she would agree with me. No, so I think, it's about sort of prioritizing. It's about saying no, which I think is a challenge, especially as a young professional starting out. You feel like you want to be involved and people ask you to do things, and it's a lot easier to say yes. I've gotten over time more selective, I would say, and careful about, if somebody wants me to do something, why do they want me? What do they think I'm bringing to the table? What are they looking for from me? Because I want to be sure I can fulfill it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do you any good, I don't think, to have sort of a shotgun approach to just blasting yourself, across the universe. I think if you can focus your efforts, you do a better job. You're more fulfilled and you're more passionate about it. And that opens up doors to do other things because you're doing a good job at it. So the balancing on any given day, it can be very out of control. But I think overall, when I took my oldest son to college, I remember being in the car with him and saying, it was always really important to me that I be there for everything that was important. And I said, can you think of anything where I wasn't there, where you wanted me to be there? And he's like, no, you're at everything. And he kind of rolled his eyes. And my youngest was in some spelling bee or something, or geography bee. And I'm like, oh, when is that? I didn't get the note. And he's like, no parents come to this, Mom. And I'm like, well, okay. So sometimes they have to back me off because I want to be there. And now I'm going to be an empty nester, so I got to find somebody else's kids to adopt or something to do to keep myself busy. But
there's probably a lot of young professionals that could use it.
Well, if anybody needs spreadsheets or organization advice, I am your girl. Maybe that's my business. Maybe
that's
I
it.
need to
You're like a spreadsheet consultant.
There you go. Life organization spreadsheet consultant.
Oh my God, you're hired.
There we go.
Well, that was really good advice. And I hope that we have some listeners who are in that stage where they just feel like all the balls are in the air all the time and like something could drop at any moment. I hope they really take that advice to heart because I think that was really good.
And I think it's okay if a ball drops. You got to give yourself, as a working parent, you got to give yourself a little grace. Like, there's going to be balls that drop and life will go on.
And it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So
good. Is there anything you'd like to add, Julia, before we wrap up? Do you want to give some information on the Abdo? Is it too late to sign up? Can people still get involved?
We've had our first session in March. Our second session, I think, is next week. It's not too late to sign up, but it's getting close to too late to sign up, just because the cohesiveness of the group, it's a 9-month
Yep, that makes sense.
series. So, but there is probably time, and you can access that through Abdo's website, or somebody can certainly reach out to me at Blethen Behrens. I'd be happy to get you connected if it's something you think you or one of your staff members would be interested in. But by the time this airs, we may have already had our second. But feel free to contact me. I mean, we keep a running list, too, of people to invite for the next session. We'll be doing it again next year in March, starting again. So while it might be too late for this one, it's not too late for next year. And it's not this time of the
So, well, thank you so much, Julie Ketcham Corbett, Blethen Behrens. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You can get the Build Blue podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also available on YouTube.